Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Myslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore.
This episode is brought to you by the Carnivore Bar, an ancestrally inspired meal replacement bar. It has simple ingredients: beef, tallow, and salt. It's shelf-stable, it's portable and convenient, it's great for hikes, long business trips, traveling, or just an easy, ready-to-eat option to have in your pantry. It's the perfect combination of crunchy and creamy texture. Go to carnivorebar.com and use code CarnivoreCast to save. Thank you.
Joey Schwartz is a 19-year-old independent researcher studying the link between nutrition and disease. He spent much of the last 2 years digging deep into the scientific literature, which enabled him to reach the conclusion that a diet comprised of solely animal-derived foods is optimal for human health. On his YouTube channel titled Carnivore Camaraderie, he shares science, a host of personal experiences, and conducts podcasts, all of which to serve to reinforce his belief that a carnivore diet is the absolute best action a person can undertake to achieve good health. Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Joey.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, man, I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, likewise. It seems like you have a wealth of knowledge for someone your age. I wish I had what you had when I was 19. But how did you get here? Tell me about your story and your health journey.
Yeah, so it started when I was about 15, 16, getting into lifting weights with my friends. And we're all starting to really try to put on muscle. And what we quickly realized is that diet is an integral component to getting strong. But the problem was what we were being told to eat didn't really work in application. So we're being told to go with the whey protein shakes and lots of bananas and almond milk and avocados for fat, no saturated fat. And it was all just this, this standard of advice that we hear purported just constantly in all spaces, whether it be medical or bodybuilder areas or all that stuff. And we followed it. So all my friends started doing it. And some got results because what they did was they cut out their processed stuff, like they processed grains and seed oils and sugars and stuff. So some of them actually got really good results. But me, having been in a family with a nutritionist and having been just around whole foods my whole life, didn't experience benefits. I actually got worse. So I started eating this stuff, carbs and no fat and all this, just taking on this lifestyle that really wasn't good for me. And I ended up getting some skin issues like rosacea and some pimples, and I was chronically fatigued as well. And I kind of had this realization that humans should not be this way. Like there's got to be something going on, because there's no way that in a natural state anybody would have to suffer these things that I'm dealing with. And they weren't even debilitating. They weren't even that bad. It was just, they're not normal. I mean, we shouldn't be sick. We shouldn't have any of these things, like none of them. And I realized that. And so I wanted to fix it. And I started researching just nutrition, just trying to read the studies. Because what I quickly found was that every study was saying something different. There's somebody saying high carb is good, low carb is good. I just need to read this stuff and figure it out myself. So that's what I did. I quickly found that low carb is better. Like that was easy to find. I found that within 30 minutes of just looking at studies, because the low carb group is having better biomarkers in every single way. Like everything's better in the low carb groups. And I found that out relatively fast. So I say, okay, I'm going to cut out carbs. And so I stopped eating processed carbs. I stopped eating carbs in general, fruit, all that stuff. But I was eating vegetables. So I was doing keto. I knew I was doing keto. I was doing high fat too, but I wasn't eating saturated fat. I was scared of saturated fat still. I still hadn't done the research that I've done more recently, showing that saturated fat is actually not a risk factor at all. In fact, saturated fat is correlated with positive health outcomes. Same with LDL, positive health outcomes, especially from a psychiatric standpoint and other ways as well. But I didn't know this at the time. So I'm eating polyunsaturated fats. I'm eating monounsaturated fats in the form of nuts, olive oil, seeds, stuff like that. And it was, no saturated fat, no good fats. And I was in ketosis, I think, but I was fatigued. I felt pretty bad for most of the day. My mood was somewhat more stable, you could say, and I guess my mental clarity was better to a degree. However, I was getting these flare ups every time I ate a bunch of vegetables because I was eating tons of vegetables, tons of olive oil. Like I said, it was really big on the olive oil and coconut. I guess I had a little bit of saturated fat in the form of coconut oil, but it wasn't significant. And I wasn't doing well. So I still wasn't doing well. I knew something was still wrong. And then I'm scrolling through some social media platforms like YouTube or TikTok or something. And I see Paul Saladino talking about how vegetables are toxic. He has a shirt that says like kale is bullshit on it. And he's like this. I think he's crazy. I just kept scrolling, didn't really pay much attention to it. But this guy keeps on popping up. Like I can't get rid of him because I'm watching this whole video. So it keeps coming up on my feed because I'm just fascinated by this. I think it's the craziest thing in the world. But it keeps showing me more of him. And eventually I decide, okay, this guy keeps showing up. I need to just at least look into what he's saying. And it all started to make sense. He's saying that the parts of the plant, like the vegetables, like the roots, the leaves, the stems, the tubers, these are the parts of the plant that protect the growth of the fruit. So the fruit wants to germinate its seeds. Everything in nature wants to reproduce. And the vegetables aid in that happening. The vegetables need to protect themselves so they're not eaten, because if the vegetables are eaten, then the fruit basically dies. No seeds germinate. And I say, okay, this makes sense. I'll give it a try. And so for 6 months, I ate meat and fruit, and I felt amazing. I felt really, really good. And then it wasn't until 6 months ago that I cut out the fruit and felt even better. Just really, really good without fruit. And I've just decided to start a YouTube channel and start speaking with people and be on social media because I can relate to a different audience than like Ken Berry and Bart Kay and Anthony Chafee can, just being younger. I've convinced a fair amount of teenagers to start trying this, eating more animal based, cutting out processed stuff. And yeah, so at this point, I'm just putting out content, and my goal is to just continue getting healthier and helping other people do the same.
That's really awesome. And it's so cool to hear your story. And I think you have a lot of self-awareness as well, to even dating back to that first thing you said when you were like, it's not normal for humans to feel this way. Like this can't be our normal state. Do you credit that to like growing up in a household with a nutritionist, or like how do you think you got to be that way?
Yeah. Well, growing up in a house with a nutritionist, it was kind of maybe set me back actually, because we didn't have fat in the house. So we cooked egg whites and we had salads all the time, and that's what I thought was good for me. Is your question like how I was able to get into this sort of like
just to, like, have you always been like a natural like questioning sort of person?
Yeah. My parents will tell me like, Joey, you always ask us questions. You wouldn't shut up. You wouldn't stop asking us questions. And I've always been just so curious about everything. Like why is the ocean blue? How does the TV work? How do a camera work? Like how does this? Nothing made sense to me. I was always asking them annoying questions, but I've always been curious, and I've always been a nonconformist to a degree. I've never really had views that align with those of everyone else, which now I realize is kind of a good thing when
it's a strength.
When it seems like most people are wrong, like the one that when if everyone follows one path, it's probably a path that's incorrect. Just from all that I've learned in the last year or so, just people didn't really get it right. So I've always been questioning things. I've always been very, very skeptical too. I don't believe things that people tell me. I never have. Like my teachers throughout all of elementary school, they would give me bad grades on my report cards for not respecting authority, but it wasn't a matter of respect. It was more like I didn't believe what they were saying. Like I've always just been, critical, you could say, of like what people say, and it's kind
of skeptic.
Right. It's definitely led me to where I am. I'm definitely grateful for that. It's better than believing everything they want you to believe.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely a strength in today's world to be able to question and dig a couple layers deeper and not take things for granted. And you mentioned feeling really fatigued even when you were on um, basically a ketogenic diet. Do
Yeah.
you think that was more a factor of the plants and the anti-nutrients, or the lack of bioavailable nutrients from like beef and other things containing saturated fat, like lack of B vitamins and stuff like that?
This episode is brought to you by Bioptimizers and their amazing magnesium breakthrough formula for stress relief and better sleep on a carnivore diet. Try it yourself at www.magnesiumbreakthrough.com/carnivore cast and use code carnivore10 to save and help support the show. For August, they've prepared a special offer for our listeners. You'll be able to buy magnesium and get free bottles of the full line of digestive health products, including Maxizymes, patented probiotics, and more. Check them out at magnesiumbreakthrough.com/carnivorecast. And remember to use carnivore10. Thank you.
It was a couple things. There was a couple reasons why I felt so badly. Definitely, as you said, the vegetables. I mean, they were really messing me up. I know that they were messing me up because I've even tried trying a vegetable, just throwing it in randomly in the past few months, and it messes me up. I mean, I know what they do. I knew that every time I ate peppers, especially peppers, they were bad. My skin just got so red. I knew it then. I just kept eating them because I figured they were healthy. So stupid in retrospect, but so it was definitely the anti-nutrients. Those were doing it. Those were doing a problem, conferring a detriment, a big one. And I also was nutrient deficient. I mean, I had to have been. I wasn't eating saturated fat. There are no other bioavailable sources of ADK2. So if you're not eating animal fat, like you're missing out without question. So I was definitely in that space. Also, the keto adaptation phase, which a lot of people talk about, I was just in the heart of it. So, but here's my thought, and Anthony Chafee has said this a few times before. He's talked about how the reason why people have a difficult keto adaptation phase is because they're eating so many vegetables, which is just really, really messing with their electrolytes and messing with the way they feel due to the anti-nutrient content, just all the toxins. So I think that if I had gone from what I was doing, this bodybuilder type diet, straight to carnivore, it would have been a smoother transition and less painful in terms of the length of the keto adaptation phase, simply because I would have been consuming pure nutrition and I wouldn't have had to deal with all the toxins that I was just stuffing down my throat. So yeah, keto is difficult for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And like what do you think is like the path to making something, like you mentioned you and your friends like finding bodybuilding diets and things like that? It seems like TikTok and these social media apps are like exploding with a lot of like fitness influencers and things like that.
Yeah.
What is like your strategy, and also what do you think in general like needs to happen for like this type of eating to become more popular amongst that generation?
It's a good question. Yeah. So my strategy in particular is trying to make I'm just trying to make good thumbnails and titles. I mean, I'm trying to get as popular as I can. I really think that I can help a big number of people, and I'm trying to just do it as strategically as I can. So I'm trying to study what does well on YouTube and how to match the algorithm very well. I've been growing pretty fast. I think I sort of got it down, but I'm trying to just make content that appeals to this niche, this carnivore niche that is growing so fast, and I think it's working. As for how to get carnivore into the mainstream, how do we get it big? It's going to come from the bottom up. It's not going to come from the top down. So it's going to come from the little guys who spread it out to all the other little guys, and now we're not so little anymore, and we make our way up, and it's becomes too big, too powerful for the people up top to neglect. I mean, even at this point, it's kind of crazy to me how the results we're seeing with carnivore are just unbelievably good. I mean, nobody switches back. Nobody goes carnivore and goes back to eating a bunch of plants, despite the restrictive nature of a carnivore diet, seeing as you can only eat like 10 things versus a vegan diet, you can eat 1,000 things and everyone switches to omnivorous, if not carnivore diets at some point, assuming you're not an ethical vegan, which in itself is an oxymoron. But it's just it's going to happen from the bottom up. It's not going to be the big doctors, the big pharmaceutical companies, the people in control. They're not the ones who are going to advocate for this and eventually get it as a protocol or supplementary treatment for people with autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. It's going to happen from people like you and I. So that's that. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it has to happen that way. And you mentioned saturated fat being essential, especially like in the form of for mental health. And you talked about research relating higher LDL levels to greater mental health. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And do you think, like you've probably seen, as I have, a lot of cases of people improving their mental health by switching to a carnivore diet, lowering anxiety, depression, things like this, which I'm always amazed by. Do you think it has a lot to do with that pathway, or is it, eliminating plants? Is it something else? How do you think about that?
Yeah, well, the first thing that we need to establish is that these mental illnesses like anxiety, depression, bipolar, they're not genetic. So these are not genetic illnesses. These are predispositions. These are people with predispositions who are eating the triggers like plants that are causing this inflammation in the brain, this biochemical dysregulation. And as a result, they're getting these mental issues. The reason why you see depression lingering in families, like it's in like a familial line, is because people have susceptibilities. However, you are not doomed to get depression. There's no human on this earth who is who's going to get depression regardless of what they do. It's not it's not possible, because there's nothing in animals in nature don't get depression. Animals in nature don't get bipolar disorder. So these things are due to a deviation from natural living habits all the time. Okay, so seeing as this is true, if these are not in natural context, it's due to deviation, as I said. And this deviation exists in the form of poor nutrition, lack of saturated fat, too many plants, which is why when people go carnivore, as you said, their mental health improves so much. I mean, I can just speak from personal experience. I'm so much more calm now. It's kind of like I'm in a constantly sedated state. Like I can work really hard, be energetic, have fun, be happy, but I'm calm. And it makes sense that humans aren't supposed to be super erratic and just all over the place. No, we're supposed to be calm, relaxed. We're supposed to be strong, but at the same time, we're not supposed to be just hyperactive all the time. Even ADHD, like this stuff is not just genetically passed down. No, these are environmental triggers. These are epigenetics. So having established that, right, that people aren't just doomed to getting mental disorders, it comes down to, in many cases, deficiencies and toxicities. It's malnutrition. It's toxicities in the forms of plant materials, whether it be fiber, whether it be oxalates, lectins, things like that. And it's deficiencies in the forms of, in many cases, fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, K2. And also, being in a ketogenic state is neuroprotective. I mean, this has been shown time and time again. There are RCTs, randomized controlled trials with Parkinson's patients. They improve with carnivore. People with psychiatric issues, bipolar, for example, improve with ketosis. LDL is protective, particularly in people with depression and bipolar. There are randomized controlled trials showing that people with all kinds of these problems, even Alzheimer's, improve with ketosis relative to a control group, right? So like one group that's not doing a keto diet. And the evidence is just really, really growing. Chris Palmer talks about it all the time, how ketosis is just, the best thing for people to do. And there's actual mechanisms in place that can help substantiate this reality. Like GABA glutamate. That's one where people with epilepsy have too much of this hyper glutamate and not enough GABA. And you eat a ketogenic diet, and you have more GABA, which is more calm, like provoking, and versus glutamate, which is excitatory. So your brain just sort of is meant to run on fat. It's meant to do well with lots of meat in the diet and not lots of plants. And as a result, when you eat that natural way, you're not going to have these issues that humans really shouldn't have, that nobody should have. So yeah, I think saturated fat, the saturated fat, meat, no plants. That's the puzzle. That's the key to a great mental health.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And like I said, I continue to be surprised by the ways in which this type of eating can help people, especially mentally. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, especially considering how modern medicine so quickly dissociates mental health from nutrition, from any extraneous factors. Like, I remember how shocked I was too when I realized that mental health can actually be profoundly impacted by diet. Like, who would have thought, right? I mean, but then again, I go to school, or I did go to school, in high school. It was a pretty well off group of kids, a pretty like financially stable demographic, who clearly didn't have much struggle. From what I knew about them, they didn't have these traumatic childhood experiences. Yet many of them were depressed on antidepressants, despite not having been through something traumatic in life. And I just remember thinking, like, why is this happening? I mean, this shouldn't happen. It doesn't make sense. And looking back, it's malnutrition. I mean, that's really what it is. It's why these people who are rich, have lived wonderful lives, are taking meds or taking psychotropic medications to to get some sort of false sense of relief, because those don't work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting and sad to hear that a lot of your peers in high school were on antidepressants. That's crazy. And one thing I notice about your channel, Joey, which I think is great, you're clearly growing it a lot and putting out a lot of awesome content. You seem to focus a lot, at least lately, on interviews with former vegans.
Yeah.
What do you like about interviewing former vegans, and like, what do you think we can glean from that?
Yeah. I like talking to the former vegans a lot. Because I like talking to anyone that's carnivore. Let me just say that. But the vegans, it's a little bit different because they are so open minded. The former vegans who then go carnivore. It's like, to be in that cult like space, and then to go from that to the complete opposite of carnivore. It takes a special kind of person, and that's what I've noticed. I mean, there are a lot of people who are carnivore like myself, who don't who like, okay, let's just say everyone who's carnivore is cool. I mean, I haven't met a single carnivore person that I don't like, just because to be a carnivore, you need to be a nonconformist as well. By definition, you're not conforming with what we're being told. You're recognizing that the government is wrong, and that the best way to ensure good health is by doing something that almost directly opposes it, like directly contradicts it. The vegans, in addition to sharing a powerful story that can positively affect a lot of people, they there's something about them. I don't know. It's like, I just like talking to them. Also, they do well on YouTube. The former vegans, like 15-year vegan goes carnivore for 5 years and reverses debilitating illness. Like, people are gonna watch that, and it makes the vegans upset. Like, it really makes them mad, because, which is good. We want their mission to fail. It's just extremely harmful. But yeah, it's like when they're going vegan and it literally destroys their health, and then they go carnivore again, um, or like not again, but they go carnivore, and then they get this complete relief. It's like, this is a very powerful sentiment. It's a testament to the power of eating meat, and I just think that's a good message to spread. Also, it's kind of an untapped space in the YouTube area. Like, there are a lot of YouTubers who do interviews with professionals and other YouTubers and doctors, but people aren't really interviewing the former vegans, as far as I've seen, and it's kind of a space that I've tried to fill. So yeah, and then people are enjoying it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always really liked doing on my podcast is trying to mix the like experts and professionals and doctors with N=1 case studies.
Right.
And I built a lot of great relationships that way too, like having people like Brett Lloyd on and Dr. Nevada Gray and folks who had never been on podcasts before. So that's really great, and I love the way you're doing it. Another thing I wanted to ask you is, like, you keep coming back to carnivore is the natural way for humans to eat.
Yeah.
What way do you like to construct that thesis, or like how do you like to think about it? Is it from the biological perspective, anthropological? Like how do you what has really convinced you of that?
I'd say the anthropological is a pretty powerful way to really understand that. Just knowing that we were in the trees, Australopithecus, probably 5 million years ago, eating fruit, came down from the trees, which is why we evolved from herbivores, which is why we don't have fangs, we don't have these like huge claws because we evolved from herbivores, and there was no selective pressure to lose those things, especially when they were so important in basic human activities like nurturing a child and communicating. It would be hard to talk if we had these huge things in our mouths. And so, stable nitrogen 15 isotope testing is showing that we ate almost exclusively meat. We got our protein from animal foods, not from plants. Stable nitrogen 15 isotope testing, very, very powerful. The fact that every single nutrient is more bioavailable in meat, like how do people not make this simple connection? We are carnivores. We're facultative carnivores. If we weren't, then we would be able to derive nutrition from plants. Unfortunately, we can't do that, or maybe fortunately, because they taste like crap. Fiber, we can't use it. Like, we eat fiber, it just goes right through us. Gorillas can get something like 70 to 80% saturated fat from the fiber that they digest and ferment. We don't have that capability. We have the vestigial organ that used to be a large cecum that we use to digest fiber, and now we can't do it. We are carnivores, clearly. If like people recommend eating fiber, it's you can't digest it. Like, why would you eat something that you can't digest? It just goes right through you. Meat, the reason why we have such few bowel movements is because we consume pure nutrition, just pure nutrients, nothing else. There's lots of reasons. Omega-3 oils metabolism is a big one. We know how important omega-3s are, and we can't get omega-3 from plants. You can get ALA, but the conversion to omega-3 is abysmal, or like the conversion from ALA to DHA and EPA is really, really bad, and your ratios are just all messed up because of the amount of omega-6 that is in seeds and other plants and stuff. So everything just points to us having eaten lots of meat. And then we look at what happened when we stopped. So we look at what happened post-agricultural revolution. We go from 6'3" to being like 5'8", 5'9". We go from having well-developed jaws to needing to like having smaller jaws and needing our wisdom teeth taken out. We're not really doing too well at this point from a health standpoint. Also, people say, well, we died at age 20 to 30 years old. How do you know? I don't believe that at all. I don't think there's any real convincing proof that early humans died at that age. And there's no reason to actually believe that, especially when there are people in meat eating populations that are living until 120, 140. I think humans are supposed to live until 140 to 150. Just that should be. I think that's about our set point. I really believe that eating a natural human diet is the best way to maximize longevity. And vegans will sometimes say, well, people do well on plant-based diets, and the plant-based populations are the ones that live the longest. Well, the problem with that is, of course, the health user bias. But again, if you admit that the natural human diet is meat, you kind of dug yourself into a hole, because now the burden of proof is on you to suggest that somehow humans are the only anomaly in nature that doesn't do well on their natural diet. The burden of proof is on the vegans now, because that's a pretty drastic thing to say. It's pretty radical to suggest that we do best on a diet that is novel to us. It's a really strange idea. They need to prove it. Until they do, we should stick to our natural diet. And I think the anthropological aspect is extremely powerful. You can also just look at anecdotes and run the test on yourself. But once I realized that carnivore is a natural diet, that's when I realized, like, I'm not going back unless they prove that uh unless they prove their point. We should assume that a natural diet is best.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I think it's a confluence of factors, and like you said, once you understand, like even the bioavailability, it's very hard to deny that that is our preferred fuel source and our preferred diet as facultative carnivores. What do you think of? I'll just say recent arguments in the carnivore low carb space that being in a constant zero carb state or not having certain sources of either fruit or honey or other sources of carbohydrates occasionally can be detrimental in the long run.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people on carnivore diets, they don't eat enough protein and they fall into this state of insulin suppression, which is kind of a term that's been circulating around a lot now. Which, makes sense. If you're not eating enough protein, you don't get the insulin spike, and we need that insulin spike for electrolyte regulation, and it's really really important. So like Paul Saladino, let's just say it, like Paul, he I think he was, I don't think he was doing carnivore right in that he wasn't eating enough protein. I think that, he's a bit of an anomaly. It seems like he's just, I don't doubt that he's doing better with fruit, and maybe some people do feel better with fruit, but it's a clear indication that something in the way that, like, some way that they were doing carnivore was not correct, because like this is the way we are designed to eat. And maybe it's that he was missing boron. Like maybe his body needed more boron, or he needed he needed more of an insulin spike, as I was saying. Like, regardless, we know what fructose does. So like we know that fructose is a toxin. It causes more glycation than glucose does. It metabolizes into fat. He's going to pay the price for what he's doing eventually. Um, I did the fruit thing myself, so I know both sides. I was heavily sort of intertwined with that group of people for a long time before going to the carnivore group of people. Um, you know, I don't know. It's an interesting one. We need more research on it. What do you think about the fruit thing?
Yeah, I'm not really decided either way. I think it can be dangerous going into the argument of like that person isn't doing the diet right, because that's the same argument a lot of vegans make.
Yeah,
Not to say it couldn't be true. It very well could be. I think like we don't really know. There isn't enough experience of like there is a lot of anecdotal evidence of people on carnivore only long term thriving, doing very well.
yeah,
The zero carb um, uh, Facebook group proves that, and folks like Kelly Hogan and others who have been doing this for a very long time, hundreds of people. But I don't think there have been a lot of people who have been doing a meat and fruit diet for a long period of time.
yeah,
And really like dug in, compared biomarkers, compared even clinical symptoms, like how they're feeling, how they're doing, things like that. So I think it's really hard to say. And a lot of the mechanistic arguments that a lot of people make, including Paul, I think it's tough because those mechanisms are fundamental to human biology, but they are usually studied not in people on a carnivore diet. And I just think like focusing too acutely on like one or two studies that show a certain mechanism or a certain result can be really dangerous.
Yeah.
And whenever you're looking at science and trying to change your opinion at something, you should look at the body of research and other sources. Like I said, like anecdotes, biology, anthropology, etc. So I'm still not sold either way. I think my general feeling is like if people want to try it and experiment and see if they feel better, that's fine. That's totally cool. I'm not like a carnivore purist. I'm not gonna say someone isn't carnivore if they eat a few other things.
Yeah.
And I think but if you're thriving on an all meat diet, you feel awesome. You feel healthy, your symptoms of whatever you're struggling with are gone or down, then keep doing what you're doing. You shouldn't feel afraid that you're not having fruit or something else.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that it's actually possible, and I've gotten some criticism from people I've spoken to this about, but I think that it's possible that some people will actually benefit from fruit during the warm months. So 100% not year round, but I think there's a chance that when it's really sunny outside and you're getting lots of sun, if you're going to eat a piece of fruit, it could actually be beneficial for some people, and only when it's hot out. Um, I think that could actually make some sense. Just considering that we need the sun or to metabolize fructose, which of course, like fruit would only be around during the warmer months. So of course you're only going to eat fruit when there's a sun outside. Um, yeah, that's my thought. I don't same with
Yeah.
you. I don't have anything against the people who are eating fruit. Personally, I think that there's probably too many of them. Like this is probably a really small group of people who would do well with the implementation of fruit. But
Yeah, time will tell, I think.
Yeah.
So Joey, why did you decide to name your YouTube channel Carnivore Camaraderie? I'm curious what the message is there.
Just a tight knit group of people. I mean, I knew when before I even started my YouTube channel, just having scrolled through so many subreddits, that it was a real community of people who were like supporting each other, and they were all very much into it. So it's a camaraderie, and even now, I can say that name is it's proven to be true. It really is a group. I've had people who reached out to me, and they're like, Joey, I'm going to design a website for you. I'm going to do this and that for you. I'm going to like help you out with all this stuff. Just they don't gain anything out of it. It's just people who recognize that I'm trying to do something good, and they're being nice. They're rewarding me for it. So I think I like that I picked the name. It was kind of just a random little like Carnivore Camaraderie sound. You have some alliteration there. Sounds fine. That was yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I really like that. I agree. And I think community is such a vital part of people trying this way of eating or doing something against the norm and feeling confident and supported. Not everyone is. A lot of people are self-conscious about their diet decisions, and it can feel alienating if you're not around other people who are trying this or thinking this way or eating this way. So I think community is absolutely awesome, and people get it through podcasts, people get it through Facebook groups, through Instagram, different ways. But yeah, absolutely, I really like that. Joey, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed the conversation, getting to know you, and I'm really excited to watch you grow and see your future in the space. I know it's going to be a very bright one. Where can folks find you? And I'll have links to everything in the show notes.
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube, Carnivore Camaraderie. I recently started a new channel where I just post little clips to the podcast, so Carnivore Camaraderie clips, and on Instagram at carnivore_camaraderie. So you can find me there. Also, feel free to shoot me an email. It's joeyashwartz@icloud.com. You can find that in my description on YouTube. It's been great talking, and we could do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's definitely do that. Thank you, Joey.
Sure. Have a good one.
You too.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.